Good evening, everyone. Shalom, kalimera, kalispera, which in Greek is good evening and good morning. Thank you very much for joining us for another one of Yad Vashem's live online lectures. To those who I have not yet had the pleasure to meet, my name is Jeremy Weiss, and I am the director at Yad Vashem International Relations Division. I would like to open up this program by sharing with you all a poem that I happened to come across a week ago by Wisława Szymborska. The poem is called Palm of a Hand, and I'm reading. 27 bones, 35 muscles, close to 1,000 of nerve cells. Every pillow has our 5 fingers. After all, it's enough to write Mein Kampf or Winnie the Pooh. Close to 90%, 90% of Greek Jewry were murdered in the Holocaust. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor, once said, "Once I thought anti-Semitism had ended. Today it is clear to me that it will never end." I was asked yesterday by a group of friends and partners from the United States why I joined Yad Vashem. I joined Yad Vashem just under 2 years ago, after serving in the Israeli Prime Minister's office in senior levels of management, and then leading Israeli international high-techs and startups. But 2 years ago, I decided to join Yad Vashem. And the reason: in a world of increasing anti-Semitism, racism, hatred, and intolerance, where social media has become a platform to spread these negative elements, we all have a responsibility to educate, to share the facts, to learn the lessons of the Holocaust, and to be proactive. The question of bystanders and the limited number of those who not only did not stand quietly, but actually did something, took action, lingers above the Holocaust for many, many years to date. In a recent survey in the United States, it showed that 41% of all Americans and 67% of millennials claimed they never knew Auschwitz existed. We all have a very senior role to do something. We cannot just stand quiet. I would like to introduce my dear colleague, Leah Micha, who heads the desk of the Balkan countries, Greek and Cyprus, at the International School of Holocaust Studies here at Yad Vashem in Israel. Leah was born in Greece, and lives in Israel since 2014. Leah holds a BA in Political Science and an MA in International Relations from the University of Sorbonne in Paris, France, and as well has a BA in Religions from the University of Athens, Greece. She started her PhD on Greek and Israel relations in the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Sorbonne. I would like to thank all of our participants who have joined us tonight for joining, listening, and then sharing with your friends and families what we learned tonight. Thank you, and Leah, please.
Hello, shalom, good evening and good morning to everyone. I'm very honored to be part of this gathering tonight. And I would like to thank you very much, Jeremy Weiss, for this very kind introduction. And also Mazal Yair, that will help with the moderation of this event. We shall talk tonight about Jews in Greece. We will go through the ancient roots of Greek Judaism, this very rich and colorful mosaic. We will give an overview of the implementation of the final solution on Greek territory, and we will conclude with a few, so to say, snapshots of Greek Jewry, those who survived, the saved, and I refer by the saved to the book of, the final book of Primo Levi, the last one he wrote before his death, bearing the title, The Drowned and the Saved. when we talk about, I'm sharing my PowerPoint presentation. When we talk about Jews in Greece, Jewish presence in Greece, the story goes back to antiquity. I know it sounds somewhat a cliche when we talk about Greece to talk about antiquity, but also in the case of Greek Jewry, I cannot avoid this cliche. In Greece, the Jewish presence is archaeologically attested at the end of the 4th, beginning of the 3rd century BCE. The element that supports that is the inscription of Moschos Moschionos. It sounds like a very Greek name, but he is the so-called first Greek Jew that we have proof of his presence on Greek territory. This element is from the Amphiario of Oropos. The Amphiario, it was a sanctuary dedicated in the late 5th century BCE to an oracle named Amphiaros. Pilgrims would go to him to seek oracle and oracular responses and healing. On this first and only inscription, which refers to the release of a Jewish slave, we have the first testimony of Jewish presence in Greece. The first written testimony concerning the presence of Jews in Greece is found in the passage from the first book of the Maccabees, where we have mention of various cities and islands with Jewish presence on both shores of the Aegean Sea, such as the island of Rhodes, Samos, Cyprus, Attica, the region where Athens is, Central Greece, Crete, Macedonia, Peloponnese, and more, as well as the island of Delos. The island of Delos is opposite the far more famous island of Mykonos, for those who are acquainted with Greece's tourist destinations, where a synagogue has been found. The synagogue of Delos brings, the synagogue of Delos is in fact the first synagogue found on European soil. And it's not only the first synagogue, but also reveals important information about the Jewish community organization during the Hellenistic and Roman eras. You see the picture on the bottom left. Going back to Athens, a synagogue was also found in excavations in the ancient Agora in Athens, as well as a piece, a tile that you see in the picture, the tile found in the ancient Agora, where it bears engraved the menorah and a lulav, the palm branch. During later Hellenistic times and following the destruction of the Second Temple, a large number of Jews leave Judea and move to the other regions of the empire. On the 12th century, the main source of information about Jewish presence in Greece comes from the itinerary of the medieval Jewish traveler Rabbi Benjamin of Tudela, Benjamin Ben Yonah, as he is known, who states prosperous Jewish communities in various places that you see on the slide. He mentions that around 2,000 Jews lived in Thebes and 500 in Thessaloniki. He mentions also the islands of Chios and Rhodes. And Benjamin from Tudela, he visited all these cities and shows in the clearest way in his descriptions how the Jews did not live in isolation in these places, mainly engaged in trade, dyeing and weaving of clothes, professions that experienced great prosperity in these cities. These Jewish populations living in Greece since the antiquity are called the Romaniote Jews. The Romaniote Jews were perfectly Greek-speaking, but used the Hebrew alphabet in writing, like in the case of Yiddish, for example. They consist a separate and distinguished branch of Judaism that traces its roots back to the Roman Empire, and they're considered Hellenized or Greek Jews. They adopted, as I said, the language and the customs, but at the same time maintained their distinct Jewish identity, acculturating but never assimilating. They lived organized in communities within the early Christian settlements, did not have separate cemeteries, but were buried next to Christians and Gentiles, practiced their religion freely and held public office. Finally, these Romaniote Jews, they kept their distinctive character, and they were not even absorbed later on into the Sephardic communities that arrived in Greece in the 15th century. These are, I'm sorry, okay. At the end of the 15th century, and even before that, between the 11th and the 15th centuries, due to persecutions and massacres that took place in Central and Eastern Europe, Jewish populations of these areas moved towards the south. Following the Alhambra decree in 1492, tens of thousands of Sephardic Jews were forced to flee the Iberian Peninsula, persecuted for religious and economic reasons by the Catholic kings Ferdinand and Isabella. Many of them took refuge in the territories of the Ottoman Empire with the permission of Sultan Bayezid II, who appreciated from the beginning their professional skills and high level of education and wanted to use them in a way to revitalize the empire. The arrival of the Sephardic Jews increased the population of the already existing Romaniote Jewish communities and led to the development of communities that existed in many cities. The largest number of Sephardic Jews settled in Thessaloniki. Therefore, the title of this site, Thessaloniki, the Sephardic Metropolis. You see in the picture, we are getting close to the Purim holiday. In a few days, there is an Esther theatrical play from 1918 in Thessaloniki. Pre-war marriage in Thessaloniki on the bottom right, as well as the title reads that the last picture on the bottom is the first, it is in French, the first conference of representatives of the Jewish communities of Greece in order to nominate the representative to the Jewish agency for the Federation of the Jewish Communities in Greece. That was in Thessaloniki in 1929. At the beginning of the 20th century, about 10,000 Jews lived in Greece. After the Balkan Wars and the liberation of northern Greece, Epirus, Chios, and Crete, the number of Jews increased and tens of thousands were added. On the eve of World War II, there were 27 Jewish communities throughout Greece. We'll see in a while a slide comprising each and every one of these. The Jews participated in every aspect of public life of the country. There were numerous synagogues, schools, community centers, hospitals, athletic clubs, and civic organizations throughout the country. When the World War II erupts, the occupation of Greece by the Axis powers began in April 1941. Prior to that took place the Greco-Italian War. This war was declared in October 1940 when Italy attacked Greece, and the Greeks succeeded in imposing a short Italian retreat to Albania. In this war, a heroic moment for Greece's national history, the first high-ranking officer to fall on the front was the Colonel Mordechai Frizis. Along with him, another 12,898 Greek Jews fought within the ranks of the Greek army. 513 were killed and more than 3,500 were wounded. All this information was documented very early in the most important, and the first most important book about Jewish presence in Greece, in Michael Molcho and Joseph Nechama, in Memoriam, Hommage aux Victimes Juives en Grèce. So following this Italian retreat, Greece was invaded by the Nazi forces and quickly overrun in April 6, 1941. And following that, a week later, the country was divided into 3 occupation zones. In the colors you see, in red, it is the German occupation zone, in blue, the Italian occupation zone, and in green, the Bulgarian occupation zone. Italy, as you see in the picture, took the lion's share in this partition of Greek territory. However, the Germans kept strategic points for them. So they controlled Athens, as you see on the map. They controlled the central Macedonia with its capital, the region of Macedonia with its capital Thessaloniki, the biggest part of Crete, a few islands of the northern Aegean. Bulgaria annexed, it is a part of Greece which is in the border with Bulgaria. So Bulgaria annexed the northern regions of Thrace and eastern Macedonia. And the Italians, as I said, they took the lion's share. They occupied the rest of the country, southern Greece, the Ionian Islands, the Cycladic Islands, and so on and so forth. According to this partition, most of Greece's Jews found themselves in the German jurisdictional zone. Not most of the communities, but in numbers. Why? Because out of the total of more than 77,000 Jews living in Greece, more than 56,000 lived in Thessaloniki, in the city of Thessaloniki, the so-called Madre de Israel, the mother of Israel. As a side note, in Yad Vashem, there is a project. I invite you to have a look on Yad Vashem's website. It is called the Deportations of Jews project. It is a research project about the deportations of Jews throughout Europe. The aim is to create a pan-European database. I was proudly part of this research project myself. And already there is an online guide for the countries that you see in this list, Greece among others. Going back to the division of Greece and the persecutions that started immediately, not immediately, I'm sorry, they started 1 year after Greece's invasion by the German Nazi army. This is a table supplied by the Central Board of Jewish Communities in Greece, where I also worked in the past, and it presents and it illustrates the laws per community, per region, and per community. It is in Greek and in English. And as you see in the bottom, there is the total numbers of population before the persecution, 77,377. The population after the persecution, 10,226. And as my dear colleague Jeremy Weiss already said at the beginning, the loss is close to 90%, 86%. The deportations in Greece started from the north, from the Bulgarian occupation zone. The Sephardic communities of the Bulgarian occupation zone were the first to experience the deportation by the Bulgarians, and their extermination rate reached very high percentages, such as 90%. The vast majorities of these communities never went back to life. In a lightning action in the early morning hours of March 3, 1943, all Jewish houses in the cities that you see on this slide, Kavala, Drama, Alexandroupolis, Seres, Komotini, and Xanthi, were stormed by Bulgarian soldiers and gendarmes. By the noon of the same day, all Jewish inhabitants of the Bulgarian occupied zone of Greece, including the Jews of Skopje and Bitola, which is today territory of North Macedonia, the country of North Macedonia, had been rounded up and confined at a specific area and consequently forced upon trains and transferred to Treblinka. The destruction, as I said already, of these Sephardic communities was complete and total, and it is considered until today one of the least known chapters of the Holocaust. On March 3, 1943, the Bulgarians gathered the Jews of Kavala. I mentioned Kavala as an example, in tobacco warehouses and transported them to Drama. From there, they were transported by rail to the Danube. Many drowned in the river when they overturned some of the barges on which they were loaded. The rest were taken to the Treblinka camp and crematoria. The Jewish community of Kavala counted the loss of 1,500 people. Following the destruction of these communities, Thessaloniki was the next one on the list. Thessaloniki was already, as I said from the beginning, from April 41 under German occupation. For 1 year, there were no restrictions. It gave a false sense of security. The fact that for the first year of the occupation, there was no harsh persecution policy against the Jews. Thessaloniki becomes Judenfrei, free of Jews, within a 6-month period, starting from March 1943 and until August of the same year, within 19 different transports, 19 different trains that left the central train station with a direction to Auschwitz, and only one of them, the one before the last, was directed to Bergen-Belsen. Before the deportation started, already in 1942, the 4.5 centuries old Jewish cemetery was violently destroyed with the collaboration of local authorities. Later on, 34 out of the 35 synagogues of the city were pillaged and their traces erased forever. In the picture, you see a memorial service already in 1945, a memorial service in the looted Jewish cemetery of Thessaloniki. The first mass anti-Jewish action took place on February 11, 1942, when the Germans ordered the entire male Jewish population to assemble for forced labor registration at the Platia Eleftherias, the Liberty Square, the main square of the city. On Saturday, July 11, known since as the Black Sabbath, all Jewish males between the ages of 18 and 45 were ordered to assemble in the central square, where under a burning July sun, they were humiliated and tortured, forced to do gymnastics and flogged by German military personnel. 2 days later, the Jewish male population of Thessaloniki, who had not yet been registered, were called back for registration. Similar acts of torment repeat themselves. Out of the 8,000 to 9,000 who registered, many were recalled a couple of days later to forced labor in various parts of the same region of Macedonia and Thrace, the neighboring region in northern Greece. Some months later, and after a generous ransom of 2.5 billion drachmas deposited by the Thessaloniki Jewish community, the men who were still alive were released in October 1942. Many did not return. The actual deportation plan was executed at the beginning of 1943. After a meeting with Adolf Eichmann in Berlin on January 20, 1943, the SS Hauptsturmführer Dieter Wischlitzeny received the order to go to Thessaloniki, accompanied by his subordinate Alois Brunner, in order to immediately start the deportation of the city's Jews. In the March 1943 activity report issued by the Thessaloniki Aegean Command, the anti-Jewish measures were described as successful. I quote, "The anti-Jewish operation in the city of Thessaloniki has been accepted without protest. In the area east of Vardar, the behavior of the Greek population vis-à-vis the German occupation is consistently friendly, although the communists try to incite the population against government measures and cause unrest." On March 15, 1943, the first of 19 transports left Thessaloniki for Auschwitz. After the departure of this first transport on March 43, the German Consul General sent a letter to the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Berlin in which he described the deportation. I quote, "The expulsion of around 56,000 Jews with Greek citizenship began today, with the deportation of around 2,600 people from Thessaloniki. 4 transports per week are scheduled to depart, so that the whole action will be completed within 6 weeks." How would I say, the wish of the German Consul General was partly fulfilled, in the sense that indeed the total of the Jewish population of Thessaloniki was expulsed, but not within 6 weeks. It took a little bit more, or close to 6 months. In this last 19th in number transport, a total of approximately 1,800 Jews were included in it. These Jews were those who had been earlier selected for forced labor. In the trial against the German consul Fritz Gerhard von Hahn that took place in Germany in February 1965, Eli Cohen testified the following. In March, I quote, "In March 1943, I was arrested and sent to a labor camp in Greece, in Thiva to be precise. In August 1943, they took me back to the Baron Hirsch ghetto in Thessaloniki. After a couple of days, we were brought, men, women, and children, to the railway station and loaded into cattle cars," end of quote. Samuel Arditi, whose testimony you see on this slide, he was also brought back from a forced labor. I quote, "We left on a Sunday at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was very hot. We were crammed into the wagons. We numbered approximately 470 people, all of whom had come back from forced labor. We were in a terrible state. They placed us in the wagon with chlorine because we were stinking. The transport from Thessaloniki to Poland lasted 10 days and most died." Lastly, Moshe Halewa, he remembers, "We numbered about 80 people in each car. We had buckets inside the cars for our needs. We emptied them on the way when the train stopped. They gave us 1 or 2 pieces of bread. That's all we had. On the way, Greeks also gave us some bread, without which we would have fainted. Unfortunately, they could rarely approach the train." Beginning of March 25, 1944, 1 year after the beginning of the deportation process from the city of Thessaloniki, the Nazis deported en masse the Jews living in the cities which had been under Italian control until then. The deportation of the Jews from the Italian occupation zone, which had become already the former Italian occupation zone following Italy's capitulation, took place starting from March 25, 1944. The Jews of Athens were also part of this same deportation wave. The prominent Jewish community of Ioannina, the very cradle of Romaniote Judaism, whose presence can be traced back in ancient times, also was part of this third wave of deportations. During a 3-month period, following the deportations from the former Italian zone, and during a 3-month period, the Jewish communities of the islands were rounded up and deported. The islands, namely Corfu, Crete, Rhodes, and Kos. The research in the German archives makes this case of the islands extremely unique in the sense that there is a long exchange of official letters, diplomatic letters, recounting some sort of reservations on the side of the Germans, and the reason was logistic problems that were more or less overcome one way or another. Despite several weeks delay in preparation, despite the shortage of means of transport, and despite problems in coordination, as the end of the war was approaching, the planned deportations were carried out according to the plan. Around a month before the withdrawal of the German army from Greece, the withdrawal took place in October 1944. So a month or two before that, the last transport to leave Greek territory departed from the Athens railway station, marking thus the destruction of the last 4 Jewish communities living at this extreme eastern part of Europe. Through this short, as I was able to make presentation of the expulsion of Greek Jewry, we saw through the numbers and the testimonies in what sense the vast majority of Greek Jews was killed, exterminated by the Nazis, and due to the assistance provided by their collaborators. The vast majority of the pre-war communities was never reconstituted after the war. The colorful world in which the Greek Jews lived before the Second World War never came back to life. But even during these dark times, there were some exceptions, enlightened exceptions, very few exceptions only. But thanks to these, thanks to these people who chose to act differently in that complex reality of the Holocaust and chose the good over the evil, we have today the chance to say that decisions, individual decisions, do matter. Thanks to them, we can prove and educate future generations about the great impact of small-scale individual decisions. These exceptions pass to us the message of taking action, being sensitive towards the shifting of norms, staying aware of the options at hand. And all that is enough in order to make a huge difference. For the last part of this lecture, I would like us to see together, in the slide that you see, there are these exceptions of non-Jews who rescued seriously in order to save Jews. And in this picture, you see also 2 rabbis who were very exceptional in the way they dealt with the occupiers and in the way they came into contact with the local authorities and set an example themselves and saved their communities. On the right, up, you have upper right, it is the Rabbi Pesach of Volos who joined the resistance. In the center is the Rabbi Elias Barzilai in Athens, who in cooperation with the local authorities managed to give the message of the Jews of Athens to hide and to seek refuge and to go to the mountains, join the resistance movement, and so on and so forth. And on the bottom right, there are another 2 figures. This is the mayor Lucas Karer of Zakynthos and the head of the church of Zakynthos, who managed to save the population of the island. The 237 inhabitants of Zakynthos, there were 0 losses thanks to their generous stance against the German authorities. In the examples, these snapshots, as I said before, of Greek Jewry, and again, I'm using the title of the book of Primo Levi, The Drowned and the Saved. We will see through these examples, again, a glimpse into more aspects of the Jewish history in Greece, of Greece. The following examples are the ones that they will serve this aim. One is the rescue story of the Haim Cohen family. And through this, we will have a glimpse into the royal family of Greece through the story of Princess Alice of Battenburg. A second story, it will be a glimpse into the rescue story of the Bourla family, a prominent family of Thessaloniki whose descendant is today the chair and CEO of the Pfizer Pharmaceutical Company on the front line of fighting the COVID pandemic. Third, a glimpse into the rescue through the brave participation of Greek Jews into the resistance movement. This we shall examine through the story of another member of the Bourla family, Moisis Bourlas, his name, who named himself in his autobiographical book, A Greek, a Jew, and a Leftist. And last but not least, a glimpse into the world of what is considered the Anna Frank of Greece, thanks to the story of Rosina Aser Pardo. Princess Alice was born in the Windsor Council in 1885. Related to most European royal families, she married Prince Andrew of Greece. They had one son and 4 daughters. Princess Alice, she was recognized as a righteous among the nations. She received this title and award by Yad Vashem in the name of the State of Israel. And apart from being a hero and a righteous, she was also the mother of Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, and as such, the mother-in-law of the current Queen of the United Kingdom, Elizabeth II. During the war, she lived in Athens, while most of the Greek family, the Greek royal family, remained in exile in South Africa. The royal palace was already occupied by the Germans. She worked for the Red Cross, helped by organizing soup kitchens. She organized shelters for the orphans and lost children. And during this same period, she hid the Jewish widow Rachel Cohen and 2 of her 5 children in her apartment in the center of Athens. The Cohen family from Trikala, it was a very prominent family, landlords who later on moved to Thessaloniki. Here you see a picture of the King George of Greece during the royal family's visit to Trikala in the house of Rachel and Chaim Cohen. His father, Elias Cohen, he was the owner of the first bank of Greece in Trikala in central Greece. The family had a close relationship with the royal family. Alice used to visit them. And when Princess Alice found out that the Nazis were quickly advancing with their plan of extermination, she sent a message through an intermediary to Rachel, the widow of Chaim Cohen, offering the 2 women shelter in her house. The mother, I have to say that already the 3 sons of Rachel Cohen, Jacques, Elias, and Alfredo had fled thanks to the Greek underground movement to Egypt. And the 4th brother, Michael, also planned to join them, but did not succeed in doing so. And he also found shelter in Princess Alice's apartment in Athens. For over a year, they lived secretly. In his testimony in Yad Vashem, Alfredo Cohen, the brother of Michael Cohen, mentioned, "She not only saved the life of my mother, the life of my sister, and the life of my brother, Michalis or Michael, but she saved also the lives of us all. We would have never left Greece had we known that the rest of the family is left being unprotected." In 1993, Yad Vashem bestowed the title of Righteous Among the Nations, and a year later, Prince Philip participated in a ceremony and planted the tree in her honor. I pass on to the second story, the story of the Bourla family in Thessaloniki. The Bourla family is a reflection on history in microhistory. His family is both typical and exceptional. Typical in the sense that it traces back in Greek Sephardic Judaism from Spain to Greece and the sufferings during the Shoah and the return to an empty Thessaloniki. Typical also because an uncle of the Sayas family was killed on the Greek-Albanian front. Typical, one can say also, as one of the family members was Moisis Michael Bourla, a member of the resistance during the occupation, that we shall see in a while. Typical, lastly, because the vast majority of the family members were deported to the Nazi camps. Exceptional for one reason only, the survival. Albert Bourla, the current CEO, chair and CEO of Pfizer, who was born in 1961 in Thessaloniki. His both father and mother were among the very few of the Jewish community of Thessaloniki who survived. As I said, it was a very prominent family. The name means jeweler, Bourla, and already in 1880, their name was included in the 38 families who contributed to charities in the city. A couple of weeks ago, Albert Bourla talked for the first time about his story when he joined the Sephardic Heritage International on the occasion of January 27, the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and spoke about how his family, his father, fled Thessaloniki to Athens, thanks to false papers provided by the chief of the Greek police, Angelos Evert, whose picture we saw before. He had issued an order to provide the Jews with false certificates, and the head of the Greek church also had ordered the clergy to provide fake baptismal certificates. Certificates. I quote Albert Bourla, "My father's family, like so many others, had been forced from their homes and taken to a crowded house within one of the Jewish ghettos. It was a house they had to share with several other Jewish families. They could circulate in and out of the ghetto as long as they were wearing the yellow star." Later on, he explained the escape to Athens and how, thanks to the local police, they escaped from the Nazis, and explains how they went back to an empty Thessaloniki and found all their property and belongings stolen or sold. And they had to start from scratch. I move on to another member of the same family, Moisis Bourlas. I already mentioned his book, A Greek, a Jew, and a Leftist. According to Stephen Bauman, about 1,000 young Greek Jewish men, women, and women joined the ranks of the resistance. The EPON, it was the youth organization. It was created by the merger of 10 youth organizations in February 1943. It coincides with the same, it coincides with the first deportations from the city of Thessaloniki. As Dr. Odette Varon-Vassar notices, the enlisting of every European Jew in the resistance had two aspects. One was the potential salvation from the persecution, and the other, the sharing of patriotic motives and anti-Nazi ideology with the fellow fighters. The testimonies of Greek Jewish fighters speak of acceptance by their comrades without discrimination in their new common identity. Moisis Bourlas was born in Cairo in 1918, already living in a multicultural environment of then Egypt, experiencing from a very early age the sense and the concept of diaspora, moved to Greece in the city of Nausa, and rebellious himself, he refused to wear the yellow star, not even for a minute, I quote, as he mentions in his book. And instead, with another 12 Thessaloniki Jews, he joined the resistance on the mountains. He was a member of the Communist Youth Organization since 1935. And he's a very unique case in many aspects. In the short time that I have, I will just say that the irony has it that he followed the fate of other leftist dissidents at the time. After Greece's liberation by the Nazi power, there was the civil war from 1946 till 1949 that followed. And during this time, Moisis Bourlas, he, as I said, followed the same fate of the leftist dissidents, and he was exiled. You see in the picture him with two other comrades of his in Ikaria, due to their political beliefs, of course, exiled. I quote, "It is the first time I get paper and pencil, and maybe this is my last writing," he writes, prefacing the story of his life, explaining how he lived all kinds of Greek wars, and he was in the war in Albania and in the mountains, and later on the persecutions of the left. And until he moved to Israel later on, and back to Greece at the end of his life. I will close this presentation. Thank you for your patience. I will close this presentation with the case of Rosina Ser Pardo, the Anna Frank of Greece, as we like to call her. I quote from Rosina's book, "My parents, Chaim and Eugenia Pardo." You see the certificate of Eugenia Pardo, the ID, in the middle of this picture, decided to escape from the ghetto with the three, they were in Thessaloniki, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, and they stayed hidden in Thessaloniki, and this is a very exceptional case. They did not flee to other cities, but they remained in Thessaloniki throughout the war. So Chaim, the parents, Chaim and Eugenia Pardo, decided to escape from the ghetto with their three children, aged 5, 10, and 14. Rosina says the danger was great. If they arrested us, they would execute us and those who helped us, even though we did not know that the ultimate goal of the Nazis was to kill us in Poland. We hid in Thessaloniki in the house of our Christian compatriots in the heart of the city, near the German headquarters, protected. In our hiding place, we were released and our prison lasted a year and a half. Her book that you see on the right in Greek, it reads 548 days with a different name. Her pseudonym was Rula Karakotsu, and she never mentioned her real name in this text. Yad Vashem has taken upon it this duty of honoring those very rare, very exceptional cases of righteous among the nations, according to its historical mandate, and since its establishment in 1953, Yad Vashem not only remembers those who were killed and those who fought, but also those who helped to rescue, and awards in the name of the State of Israel the medal and the award of the righteous among the nations. I will close this presentation with a quote from a very prominent Greek writer. His name is Nikos Kazantzakis. He was nominated for Nobel Prize 9 times, and he was born on February 18, like as today, February 18, 1883. Love responsibility, I quote, "Say, it is my duty and mine alone to save the earth. If it is not saved, then I alone am to blame." I will conclude on this note. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you for being here, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you very, very much. And your final note was actually very moving. Thank you. We have several questions, and I would like to relate one of them. The Jews in Greece, as you presented yourself, had a long history in the nation and were well embedded in the culture. Was there any type of repentance or remorse by either officials in Greece or individuals following the Holocaust to what happened to the Greek Jewry?
Thank you for this question. It took a very long time for Greece to honor and to remember and to discuss the issue of the Holocaust. I have to say that a very unique case, it has been only some 5 years ago, if my memory is right. It is exceptional in the sense that it was the first time that we heard such words from officials. And it was the case of the mayor of Thessaloniki, Yannis Boutaris, who apologized, who made sure to put in front the Jewish presence of the city, which after the war, there had been many attempts to erase it. So again, it took times for Greece to deal with its past, and today it is much different than some decades ago.
Thank you.
Yes.
Another question that came up from the audience: is there an explanation why close to 90% of Greece Jewry were murdered versus lower numbers in percentage, not in individual numbers, from other communities throughout Europe? Why such a high percentage?
I wish I had an answer in this. I wish I had a clear-cut answer. It is very multifactorial, like in every case in historical research. There are cases, it is very much different depending on the geography of the Shoah, depending on the geography of the Holocaust in Greece. So in Thessaloniki, for example, the explanation from the historical research is that the Jewish community of Thessaloniki, being a very successful one, and due to its success, was very much isolated and envied. There was in Athens, on the other side, there was more interaction between the Jewish and the Christian population of the city. In a sentence, I would say that it is known that the Christian population of Thessaloniki rather rejoiced of having a very important and wealthy population of the city sent away. At the same time, after the Asia Minor, the refugees from Asia Minor, after the 30s, most of them established in Greece, coming from Istanbul, from Izmir. They established, and there was in Thessaloniki, and there was antagonism. There were antagonists between these populations.
Thank you.
It's a very complicated answer, but it's...
I understand. Final question, I think, to close this evening, and this is a personal question. Throughout my travels around the world through different activities, I said this is a final question, a personal question. I've traveled the world, and I have a tradition to go into bookshops and ask the bookkeeper, does he have a book about the Holocaust? And I've encountered two similar answers. One in the Emirates many years ago, and the other one in Greece, in a distant village, whereby when I asked, do you have a book about the Holocaust? Not knowing that I was an Israeli Jew, the answer, both in the Emirates in this case, was yes. And it was taken and shown the book of Mein Kampf. This was not out of anti-Semitism, this was out of ignorance. My question to you is, do you see, if you know, significant Holocaust education in Greece in these days, or is it still very limited?
Definitely. The answer is, this is a clear-cut answer. As I have the chance and the honor to work with Greek educators, it is very much different what is the case today. I don't know when was the case, what is the date of this visit in this distant, okay.
Many years ago.
From your move, I understand the many years ago. And from that I can explain and I can say firmly that this is much, much different today than what it was many years ago. Holocaust education is part of the curriculum, and students visit the Auschwitz and visit Yad Vashem, and we hold annual seminars, and we have a great network of graduates, and the Jewish Museum of Greece with Jeanette Batin, who is doing an excellent work. Along with the Ministry of Education, of course. It needs always a partner, and they are excellent in this aspect, yes.
Thank you very much to Leah. Thank you very much for all those who have joined. I think we learned, I myself learned, I'm sure all of us have learned another chapter of this terrible event that continues with us to date. We all have the responsibility to continue to voice the facts and to try to learn the lessons and teach our surrounding family and friends so these horrors do not occur again, and to reduce violence and anti-Semitism and racism around the world. Thank you very much. And thank you all. Efcharisto, Kalimera, Kalispera. Thank you.
Thank you very much.